Hello, my name's Tony Brauer. I've written a book called 12 Big Lies in the Prairies of Heaven, which is about the financial crash, or more particularly, it's about how bankers, academics, journalists and politicians have constructed a narrative around it which I don't find really very persuasive. So I've tried in this book to show how there are misrepresentations and misconceptions which create a fabric of, I'm afraid I have to say it, deceit about why it happened and what the consequences may be. First big lie was that you couldn't see it coming. If you couldn't see it coming, then you were suffering from what I call gravy train blindness. You were so busy picking up the money that you couldn't look up long enough to see its approach. But it was there, people were saying it was there, it was predictable, and it was predicted. I've called this one Not My Job Gov, or The Dog Ate My Homework. It seems curious that when it comes to handing out bonuses, we can know very accurately who is responsible for what and therefore who gets paid for it. But when it comes to some crisis or some error or a failure, suddenly nobody knows who was responsible for what. Globalization, end of story. End of story has always fascinated me because it implies there can be no further argument. So my version of that is, for whom is globalization good? And I'll give you three choices, okay? So I would say globalization is good for people who've got a lot of money, and your choices of answer to that are yes, yes, or obviously. You choose. Economists understand us. If you're entirely lacking in emotion, if you're entirely lacking in compassion, if you're never whimsical, then economists do understand you. If you're a human being, then economists don't. Your bank is your buddy. This one I've called noblesse oblige, which is really based on the idea that those in power, although patriarchal and autocratic, are also chivalric. I'm afraid we get the patriarchy, we get the autocracy, but we seem to be doing without the chivalry. More is enough, which is a bit confusing in some ways, but expresses my feelings quite well. Basically, if you are looking always for more, then you're never going to be satisfied. So the way I look at it, what we need to do is to look for enough. And if you doubt me, I suggest you go and visit one of the Buddhist peace pagodas and talk to them there and look into their eyes and ask yourself whether enough is enough or not. Britain was broken. This was Cameron's claim, and I'm afraid I find it quite incredible, really. Britain wasn't broken. That was necessary as a myth in order to reconstruct it. This section I call My Grandfather's Axe, which is in memory of a classic statement. This is my grandfather's axe. My mother replaced the head and I replaced the shaft. And it's quite a philosophical chapter, I think, I'm afraid. But the important point is that things don't stay the same. What we were once, we are not now. There are two parts to this. The first is that there is a box, or you could say that there isn't a box. It depends how you look at it. Do we think inside limits? I would say that in terms of the ideas that are presented to us, yes, we do. We seem to be very much stuck into a very limited perspective of what economics is about and what can be done with it. And I feel that this is reinforced by journalists, media in general. We're all in this together. I can't see anything to contradict that statement. All you ever need to know. Well, obviously, since this is the 12th lie, one might suppose you now know everything. But I'm sorry I've deceived you. There's things I've missed out, and the things I'm most ashamed of having missed out up to this point are gender issues, environmentalism, and world poverty. although it's called 12 Big Lies, there is actually a 13th lie, which is that the question really of whether we are to blame, because we have, at least in theory, a democracy, and therefore we make our choices.